Lawyers of Reddit, what's the most ridiculous argument you've heard in court? I'm a lawyer. The most ridiculous argument I've seen was the one I actually made. One of my clients got busted cooking meth. This was a very clear-cut case. They actually caught him in the middle of a cook. No way he was getting out of this one. Even worse, he was cooking at home, and children were there. Yep, the DA loaded him up with felonies, there was no bail, and he was being held in the county jail. My client knew he was. He had been planning to get married a few weeks after he got busted. My client asks me if he can get released for 24 hours so he can still get married. I tell him that I'll ask, but that there's no way in hell they'll let him out. First, I ask the DA if they will allow it. Nope. They'll laugh. So I file a motion with the court. Now, I knew the judge was a crusty old conservative family values kind of guy who also has a raging erection for crime. There was no law involved, but I put together an argument about the sanctity of marriage and how the state should encourage marriage at all times and that sort of thing. We have a hearing and I make the argument. The DA is totally opposed and calls it ridiculous, and the judge grants it. The judge actually decided to allow my client out for 24 hours to get married. He had to surrender at the county jail at 8 AM the next day and some other conditions, but still, he was allowed out. Everyone is stunned. Nobody can believe it. The day of the wedding comes, my client gets out, gets married, then goes back to the jail. Everything went exactly like how it was supposed to, which is also pretty shocking. Former assistant state attorney / prosecutor here. This defendant is called up for arraignment and the judge is telling him that he's been charged with theft for stealing a roll of scratch-off tickets from a gas station. The judge informs the defendant that, since the value of the tickets was over $300 therefore it's a felony, rather than a misdemeanor. The defendant says to the judge, but your honor, to be fair the tickets were all losers, implying it's not theft at all. I was amazed at the ingeniousness, yet futility of the argument. I'm a lawyer. I should win right there. Anyway, we were in trial, and opposing counsel was objecting to a document I was trying to enter into evidence through one of their witnesses. The witness had identified it as one of their business records, but opposing counsel objects. Jury is in the courtroom, so the judge has us approach. We do, and opposing counsel argues the authenticity of the document. I was a little surprised. So my response was, your honor, this is their exhibit. Is counsel stating they submitted inauthentic documents to this court? Judge turns to counsel. Are you submitting non-authentic documents? Opposing counsel stammers out an "oh" and the document goes in. I was a little surprised they wanted to argue their own document wasn't authentic, just to keep me from getting it to the jury. I'm a lawyer. The state tried to argue that probable cause exists simply because there is a police report alleging the crime. From the fact that a police officer filed this report, it is a reasonable inference that the crime took place as described. But allegations are self-proving now. Well, wrap up court then. I guess no need to hear any more motions to dismiss ever. I wonder why no other prosecutor in 240 years of jurisprudence ever thought of that before. 25-year-old assistant district attorney who went to the worst law school in this state. Made a left turn on a green turn arrow. A city bus ran a red and T-boned me. My car was a little VW Rabbit, so it just scooted me, and I was perfectly fine. Driver pulls over, comes out and says the sun was in my eyes. I say I'm not hurt, thanks for asking. Police arrive, and guess what? There was a literal busload full of witnesses. Everyone had the same story. She ran a red. City paid for my car, etc. She denied wrongdoing and went to court, which I had to attend along with a witness or two and the officer. Her defense? She had a migraine. Judge, so I should let you off the hook because you had a bad headache and was driving into the sun? Driver, yes, your honor, I'm glad you understand. She got her commercial vehicle license revoked. Should have just taken the points. Traffic court, speeding ticket. Your honor, I didn't speed, and I can prove it with logic. Judge, a KII. Lady, I drive a Prius. Judge, lady, that proves I'm responsible. Specifically in the realm of cars. So I obviously wouldn't speed. She had to pay the ticket. I had a brief encounter. Personal injury prospect. Old lady slipped and fell on an icy driveway which was not salted or maintained. So she wanted to sue for damages. After hearing the story, turns out the lady fell on her own driveway which she did not salt/maintain. She was wanting to sue herself. Not so much ridiculous as ghastly, but a man accused of raping his own daughter saying he couldn't have done so because he had a 9-inch and it would have caused her damage, and that the physical signs of activity that she did exhibit were because she'd been screwing the family dog. I don't do criminal law anymore. That was enough for me. Law student. Former professor's story. Defendant busted for possession of narcotics. They were in the pocket of his leather jacket. He argues that the search was illegal because with his buttery smooth leather jacket, there's no way the officer would have felt it in his pocket during a pat down, so he shouldn't have reached in the pocket to find the in the first place. Judge asks if the jacket is the one he was currently wearing in court. It was. Judge asks to feel this jacket in the pockets. Defendant hands it to the bailiff. Judge finds more in the pocket. Needless to say, it didn't go well for him. I was in the public gallery for this while studying law. I was not the lawyer. Leeds Crown Court back in the early 90s. 75-year foreign. Yes, this is important. Man was facing a preliminary hearing at relating to charges that he had touched a 13-year relative. His barrister made a successful plea for bail based upon this man being an established pillar of the immigrant community, and the judge asked the old man if he had anything to say before he was bailed until the next hearing in a month. He made 2 comments. She was wearing very tight shorts and I should not be held responsible because no real man could resist see something like that. The judge reminded this was a preliminary hearing, not a trial, so he should wait until the trial to argue his case, especially statements that are far from exculpatory and are better suited to mitigation. I cannot reappear in a month because I'm flying back to my home country tomorrow and will not be coming back. The barrister appeared to be just as surprised as the rest of us. The judge ordered the defendant's passport seized and he was remanded in custody until his trial. I'm a lawyer. Had a female inmate claim she was molested by one of the guards. One of her most damning pieces of testimony was testifying to this large vertical scar he had on his chest from a heart operation. She continued to say that she remembered this huge scar from when he molested her. The guard got on the stand, took his shirt off, and he had a tiny horizontal scar up on his shoulder. Case over. He had apparently told her one time that he had surgery and she assumed it would have left his giant scar and used that to make up her story. Not a lawyer, but was the child in a custody case between my parents. My mother's lawyer argued for and had put in the final agreement that I had to add my mother as a Facebook friend. This never made it to court. I asked my divorce lawyer what was the worst thing a client had asked him to argue. I was expecting a "I want the salad spinner" sort of story. He had a client, a professor in his 70s who was divorced from his wife, also a professor in her 70s. They were both Jewish. His wife had a tattoo on her arm. It was a number put there by when they put her in a concentration camp in WW2 as a child. Husband was born in the US, was not German. The German government was in the process of settling a case with the survivors. She had some amount of money, a 6-figure sum, due to her. The husband wanted his lawyer to argue that he should get half the settlement money. Lawyer told him that there was a special circle in hell for lawyers who ask for stuff like that, and that he was not planning on ending up there. Also a lawyer had opposing counsel try to argue that because a landlady had written on her eviction notice "It has been a pleasure getting to know you, but please leave," but had testified they were awful tenants that she hated, that she was dishonest and nothing she said could be trusted, opened the question of dishonesty wide open. Although landlady wasn't an angel, tenants had an enormous string of fraud priors we could tell the court about as a result. Prosecutor here had a case where a man raped his 6-year-old daughter because she wore suggestive clothing and seemed to be asking for it. He tried to argue that girls are active at a younger age now. I remember thinking, what would Dexter do? Anyway, man got convicted and is now serving 2 life sentences plus 100 years. not a lawyer, but when my mom was killed by a drunk driver, we were filing a wrongful death suit. And the lawyer for the defense used my mom's cancer to say that she was going to die anyways, so a wrongful death dispensation was not owed. Several years ago I was doing a civil trial, personal injury, defending a woman who, allegedly, hit a bus matron with her car. We had offered to concede liability and just try damages. In other words, the jury wouldn't hear the circumstances of how the injury happened, just that we agreed with my client caused the injury, and they would only decide the amount of damages. We had evidence that the plaintiff was significantly exaggerating her injuries. The plaintiff's attorney refused to agree to our concession, thinking that if the jury heard the circumstances they'd want to give even more money to punish my client. So we went to trial on liability. The plaintiff called one witness, her client, who testified that an older woman in a green car hit her. They rested and I moved for a dismissal for failure to prove a case. There was literally no evidence connecting my client to this incident, just an older woman in a green car. The plaintiff never bothered to call my client to the stand. The attorney told the judge that the bus driver had written down my client's license plate and gave it to the police. They never bothered trying to find the bus driver. The attorney asked if she could just put the police report in, and I objected that it was hearsay. The attorney then actually said, please just let me put this in. I haven't had work in a while, and I got retained by a firm to try this case. I really need to win this. Of course I didn't agree, and the judge dismissed the case. I felt a little bad for her, but that was maybe the worst presentation of a case I ever saw. I spoke with the jury afterwards, and they all said they hated the plaintiff, didn't believe a word she said, and likely would have found in my favor anyway. Moral of the story, be prepared in court.